Hi, I'm Resham Arden and this is the Now I Know podcast. I hope you'll come away from this conversation saying, now I know how to support men with their well-being. Please welcome Sravan who's an ex-army medic. Welcome, Sravan.
Thank you, Resh. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for coming in and being one of my guests. The reason why I really wanted you to come in, because I think mental health for men is really, really important. Mm-hmm. I myself have a son who's 9, and I really want people listening to come away with some really great tips from yourself of how to support the next generation in terms of their well-being. Yep. But also, I'd love to hear your journey as an ex-army medic. So I just want to start off with, what age were you when you thought I wanted to go into the army? Like, how old were you?
So that, it sounds so cliche. The typical, childhood boy, I always knew that I was going to be this. And when most people say that, it often goes sideways. I wanted to be an astronaut, but for me, I always knew that I wanted to be in service. I wanted to join the military from the age of probably like 4
Wow.
4 years old. Yeah, I would tell my mom, Mom, I'm going to join the army one day, and mums being mothers would say, yeah, okay, whatever. It's just all the action movies, all the toys and the figurines. But yeah, no, I stuck it through. Yeah.
4, at age 4.
Yeah.
So how did you get into it then? Obviously you went through school, and then what did you do next?
So my mom would say it was my dad's influence, because from the age of 4, that's when I started to watch action movies like Rambo, Die Hard, etc. Mm-hmm. But for me, the main influence really came from once coming over to the UK. I joined the Army Cadets.
Okay.
I found a sense of purpose there, right? And I joined the cadets from the age of 14. And so from that stage, I realized that, this is something that I can dedicate myself to, and I did. I rose through the ranks within the cadets, and I found myself in a position of leadership. I realized this is something that I'd actually like to take forward as a career path. It just bolstered that belief system. And so, yeah, I just came from that seamlessly into the reserves, and then from the reserves going full time, because I was in college while I was in the reserves units, and then I moved into full time active duty as a medic after that shortly.
Wow. I know you probably can't share too much in your role, but did you have to go abroad?
I did go abroad. It wasn't any operational theaters. So any of the guys that may know me, there's no porky pies being told. No, I didn't go to any operational deployments. However, I did do a few overseas exercises. So when I was with the reserves, I went to Malta. Within the regular forces, we went to Arnhem, Belgium. Went to France. So I did train alongside other forces, but that was the extent of it. Yeah.
So obviously, this topic's about mental health and well-being. When you were training with other members of your team, did you notice sort of people's well-being not being as it should?
Yeah, and most importantly, it started with myself. I realized that, first of all, the military, right? And I say this not to come off as if it's like some sort of hard man lifestyle routine, but the military is not for everybody. And it's also something that's not to be looked at as a job, right? And the reason I say this is because a lot of young guys have asked me, oh yeah, being a soldier must be so cool. I'd love to do it one day, da-da-da. And then I ask them why. And often the references are to do with what they see on social media, what they see in movies, what they play in video games, right? And to a degree, I had that sort of view, which was slightly skewed, but then I woke up to the reality once I got in. And to answer your question, well-being, I noticed a massive shift in it, because all of a sudden, you're no longer just like an avatar in a fictitious world. It's very real. And the stresses that you deal with on a day-to-day basis they do stack. We're only human, right? There's only so much pressure a person can take. And with the military, it's got a very, how do I explain it? It's like a passive energy there that just expects and demands more and more and more. It's like the machine that never stops moving. And so that has pros and cons, because there's always an upward like an upward trajectory on how to increase your skills, competencies, but then there's also a cost of that. And I saw that within a lot of my colleagues. You know, I saw them get worn down, whether it was through training, going on courses, and not doing so well, not doing successfully, or not doing as well as they thought they should have. The taxation of just working weekend to weekend, constantly going away on exercises, not really seeing your family as much. You know, it's not to sort of like smear the military lifestyle at all. No, not at all. But that is the reality of it. And being somebody who used to, you know, I'm someone who's close to my family. Yeah, I felt initially very homesick at one point. And so I thought, yeah, this is something that I really need to knuckle down on, for sure.
In terms of being homesick, how often would you be away from family?
So for me, I was actually quite fortunate, because I was never away for that long. It was like the 9 to 5 sort of lifestyle. But there were moments where I was away for like a couple weeks at a time, a month at a time. But when you're constantly in touch with the family, you know, it's almost like when you're away, in that period you're away, you start to desensitize a little bit, but then you hear snippets of what's happening back home and you immediately get drawn back into that environment. And because because it's just like mum and I realistically who are here as like blood family, I'm very close to her. And she would ask me, okay, so, you know, would you be able to make it for this? And I say, well, sorry, mum, you know, I've got to do this duty, or I'm away for an exercise here. And, you know, I could sense the not the disappointment, but it's just like, okay, but like a slightly bummed out feeling, and that would just leave me feeling a little bit bummed out. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you talk about your mum. How did she feel when I know as a young child you've said you want to be a soldier.
Yeah.
You want to go into the army, but I mean I'm a mum myself, but that sort of, your heart drops if my son said to me I want to be in the army, your heart would drop because you think of the worst, right?
Yeah.
So how did your mum handle that you wanted to go and spread your wings there?
I think initially when I was younger, she just thought it was just like a child, just a child being a child, right? I mean, who doesn't dare to dream and be big, right? We all did. But as I got older, I think she started to realize more and more that, okay, this is actually something he wants to do. And funnily enough, she just accepted it, you know? And to expand on that, it was funny because some of our like family friends, or our relatives who would, mum would say, oh, Shrav's going to go join the army. And they'd be like, what? How could you let him do this? Like, you know, what mother would let their son just go and join the army and, do the whole warfighter thing, because that's what they see on TV. Yeah. But mum's belief system, her ethos is very unique. And she said, well, if it's his fate, if he's meant to be there, so be it. Like, I can't interfere with that. And that's something that he wants to do, and I will not hold him back from his passion. And if that changes, or if he gets maimed, injured, or anything else in line of service, so be it. So I think she became very accepting very quickly as I got older.
Wow. That's a big lesson, isn't it, for a lot of mums out there? If their child wants to do something, that's anything, isn't it? Not just the army, just anything their child wants to do. So what, you mentioned there's lots of burnout. Like, I know the training sounds rigorous in the army, but did they ever focus on people's, like, your mindset, your mental health? Was that not really discussed there? It's more physical. Yeah,
so what I'll do is I'll walk you through the different phases of training and what gets, from my experience, what was the main like focus, because there's always like a main intent, a main focus with each building block that creates the foundations of, a well-rounded soldier. So in basic training, they break down the civilian aspect of you. So, the bad habits like binge eating, staying up like extremely late, laziness, lethargy, not really taking care of yourself. It's not to say that everybody's like that, but by the military standard, there's a standard that you must adhere to. So the focus is very physically demanding. It's very like, it's our way, or the highway, essentially, because, we're all there by choice, right? You volunteer, you're not voluntold, as they like to say. So it's very physically demanding, because you need to reach the basic minimum standards to then go into your next phase of the foundation module, which is your phase 2 training. Now I went down the medical pathway, which I would say was a lot more focused on mentality, mindset, alongside the physical ability, but also academic, because that school that I was a part of, in particular, was going through like a prototype phase, where the course itself was like a hybrid medical course, where they were bridging how UK medics were being trained with, or rather to, the NHS emergency medical care standard. And with that, there was a lot of, focus on being empathic, developing, a good sense of bedside manner, having a duty of candor, etc. Because we weren't just going to be operating in a military environment. We were being trained to operate everywhere, and a lot of us actually did go everywhere. And I was on the home front, essentially. And that was a very mentally taxing course, for sure.
Why?
So, alongside with the academic pressure, it's just like going to uni or college in a sense, and it was very, very demanding. I mean, within the first 4 weeks, we had our first pass or fail attempt, first pass or fail test. And if you failed, especially in my case and my peers who were on that course's case, we were the last course, right? We were called DM10, right? DM stands for Defense Medic. That was the name of the project. And so we were told, right, guys, if you like mess up on a pass or fail attempt, that's it. You're done. And then you're no longer eligible to get this qualification. So the pressure was even higher, right? Because on top of that, we had to prove ourselves to be academically strong enough to, hold up to the standards of the Defense Medical School. But then there was also the added pressure of, okay, it's one and done.
No second chances.
That's it. No second chances. And I think when you're put in an environment like that, it becomes very real very quickly, and suddenly you start to question other things like, can I do this? We start to realize, like for me especially, I start to realize like, okay, I'm a human being with limits, because now I'm really feeling the pressure, and all of a sudden it's like it's do or die. The dream will stop here.
Wow.
if I don't make the cut, if I don't survive the cut. And especially that was especially the case when I actually almost failed my pharmacy module. And I remember telling my mum this, and I was stressed out, she was stressed out, and I had 5 resits in a day, and they were all different modules. Like one of them, and they all demanded different elements of like my cognitive ability to regurgitate information, to take information in, and then also perform in like a mock environment. So I was literally like fighting this little battle on all fronts. So that test really helped me understand like the limits that I can push myself to, but it also burnt me out like massively, because after that I just felt like I had no energy left. Yeah, it's very academic and a very like mindset intensive aspect of service, for sure.
Sense of burnout. I know we're going to keep touching on burnout because
Sure.
It's so important, especially with what you went through. Did you have any of your friends that were on that same journey as you that didn't even get to that stage, that they just dropped out before it?
Yeah, so I had one friend who like passed all their tests, but they just decided, I think it was after the first placement, because the first placement was with the ambulance service. So we were, fresh students, like super keen because, oh yeah, we were using the JR Calc, and we know all this new cool medical jargon, and we're throwing everything out there, right? But then you get to your first, like, we call man down casualty, and you realize the reality of, what it looks like for like what it looks like in an environment where another human is suffering, or even worse potentially. And I think that was the point where my friend said, no, enough. that was it.
It's not for me.
Yeah. And it's not for everyone. That's the truth, you know. Again, I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's not like a hard man, you know, only the strong will survive type of routine, but you really do need to have the stomach for it, because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. And I think more importantly, the mindset. The mind has to be strong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what made you leave?
So, I mean, I spent seven years in the military, and this was like literally at the turning point of COVID. And so I was at a point where I was working in like the equivalent of a GP, and I started to just feel a sense of stagnation. And I just asked myself, like, is this really where I see myself for the next 5, 10, 20 years of my life? Bearing in mind, we had just entered a period that I don't think we've seen in like a good century. We had not experienced a global pandemic that quite literally froze time, froze time and everything to a complete grinding halt. And I started to feel, I used that time to really start questioning and doing like soul searching. I started to really ask myself, like, what's going on here? And the answer that came back was like nothing. And I would say I'm someone who's always been quite in tune with myself. I come from quite a spiritual, I have a strong spiritual baseline, right? And whenever I've asked myself a question, even during the time, like for example, when I was just struggling with like my pharmacy modules, etc., I always had like that, like that inner voice kind of send something back, right? I would send a message, go ping, and then pong, something comes back. But for the first time in my life, I heard nothing, like absolutely nothing. It's almost like I quit on myself. And I just couldn't wrap my head around why. I also wasn't like mentally in the right place. There were other things going on in my life where it was just building up. Mm. But there was no answer coming back. And then I realized, okay, something is not right here.
When you mean no answer coming back, like there's no voice in your head telling you the next step? Pretty much, yeah.
Like there's no next step. It's like you're on your own, dude. And so yeah, that's quite a nerve-wracking feeling.
Yeah. I mean, you say looking back, you weren't in a good place.
Yeah.
Like, what were those symptoms? Like someone listening to this and they feel like they're not in a good place. What would you describe how you were feeling in those times?
It's just like being in this perpetual rut. And it's like, you're in a rut, you need to change, but you just don't have the willpower. It's almost like I had like this heavy blanket just weighing me down. And a lot of it, like now I look back on it, a lot of it was just to do with my lifestyle at the time, which was not very healthy. I was like in in an entire flat, essentially by myself. So that also, didn't really help, because I was just in these four walls with nothing but my own internal dialogue. And the problem with that is when you start to create an environment based off your habits, because your habits create your lifestyle, and if they're particularly not very good habits, that internal dialogue starts to twist and mesh and mold towards it, right? Because that ego is very fragile, and it'll do everything to preserve you. So one side, it also will try and save you, but on one side it was saying something's not right here, but on the other side it was just telling me, look man, just stay in this bubble, stay in this lane. And so symptom wise, I mean, I don't like to just throw like diagnoses out or whatever it is, but I did feel myself like quite heavily depressed. I felt myself being sluggish, lethargic. I just lacked drive. My sense of ambition was just cut very short. I've always been an ambitious person. Whenever I achieve something, I always want to move to the next rung of the ladder. I always want to push myself to see what else is there. But there was no hunger, there was no drive. I was just simply existing. And that's why I think that voice in my head just kind of checked out, because at that point I realized I was checking out of life. I was quite literally just saying, you know what? enough's enough. And that's a very dangerous place to be in. And the environment that I was in was not conducive at all.
I think what you describe is probably common to a lot of people listening, because in lockdown, lots of people lost that routine and that purpose of their jobs, because not everyone could just work from home. You know, they didn't have those sort of jobs. So, you know, anyone listening, like, what was the turning point that got you out of that depressive state? Did you communicate with someone how you were feeling? Like, what was the turning point to change that for you?
Yeah. So I actually attempted counseling a couple times. I spoke with one lady who was helping me with like a tough like relationship issue that was going on. And I mean, that again was just like a byproduct of my life, like my lifestyle. You know, I'm a firm believer in you attract what you are, right? So if you're on a negative downer frequency, you're going to attract negativity. You're going to attract people of that caliber. You're going to attract situations or things that put you in that situation, even when you start to try and, you know, claw your way out. So I needed to develop like a holistic sense of recovery. And the funny thing is, I always had the answers, which I had learned through the military, which was growth will only take place in times of hardship. So I had to then take myself to a level where I had to push myself and challenge myself and quite literally, you know, look the man in the mirror in the eye and be completely honest and accountable with myself. And for me personally, the one thing that was a turning point to that was a lifestyle program called 75 Hard. So there's a guy named Andy Frisella, and he's an entrepreneur who created this program to basically build a strong foundation to, you know, win those little battles that we have within ourselves. I've sort of coined like my own little catchphrase, which is you win the war one battle at a time. And I truly believe like that's what life is in a sense, right? Yeah. It is like a perpetual just fight to constantly be better, to do more.
Yeah.
So yeah, I won't go into too much detail about that, but that was a massive turning point. Another turning point was also consuming the appropriate material. So to sort of like peel the curtain back a little bit, I was a hardcore gamer for most of my life, right? And after I left the army, especially, I hit this this insane period of my time where I was literally spending like I'm not even kidding, like 16 hours a day gaming, you know, going to bed at like 6 a.m, waking up at like 2 p.m, because I just lost my routine. I lost the discipline. I just lost it all, right? And so that's why I found comfort, right? And growth will never take place in your comfort zone, contrary to popular belief. Because if you're always comfortable, you're just going to stay there. You're just going to stagnate. You never venture forward. And so I found myself being trapped in this virtual reality and quite literally like living vicariously through the games I was playing. And that was also like a wake-up call, because I was like, well, how is it? Like, for example, like on GTA, how is it? I was on like these role-playing servers. I was like, why is it that I'm like a big shot EMT here who's got like a pretty girlfriend and having all these cool social interactions with people in this game? But the moment I log off, I feel this emptiness inside, and I felt this void just like consuming me. It's like the darkness was just filling up the room again. And that's when I think that's when the penny dropped. And I said, hey man, like life is a game. Like, play it as if you would play this. But the only way that you're gonna get there is by putting in the work, you know, hitting the gym, reading books that are there to deliver value. You're not gonna have like a massive revelation by reading, you know, like no offense to like J.K. Rowling, but like reading through the Harry Potter saga, terrific books. But I mean, look, I'm not gonna learn how to like fly, you know, and like build a business by reading fantasy and fiction. So I started to, you know, mend and like heal and do those like little boring rituals and steps, which is what 75 Hard is all about. It's like consistency. That was the biggest issue as well. It was picking up a skill and then doing it day in, day out, to the point where that that exciting phase kind of wears off, like the honeymoon period wears off. And then you're like, oh, okay, 6 a.m., let's go to the gym again. I don't really feel like doing it. And that's where the real progress is made, because that's where we start to push against ourselves, right? And that's where you start to win those battles, and that's what wins you the war. So, yeah.
So your social media page is very much about going to the gym and fitness and your routine in the day, but that's a very big jump from where you were before. So I know you you've done baby steps. So what was like your first step to going to the gym, or did you just go to the gym before that?
Yeah, like off and on. I mean, it's mandatory in the military, but you see, it's what I call enforced discipline. And if you have enforced discipline, you'll never. You show up for the program, you show up for other people, but then when it gets to the crunch time and when it's about you and it's personal to you, you'll never show up for yourself. Constantly just living to fulfill like another person's dream or another person's goal isn't self-fulfillment. And that's why I'm such a heavy advocate for, these elements of self-improvement. So how I started initially was, they were like micro baby steps. It was something as simple as, okay, set an alarm to wake up and stick to that.
Yeah.
And once I started to do that, the next step was, okay, let's just get to the gym. And I learned something very revealing there, because it's like a two-stage action, right? It's like a two-stage mechanism. You've got the trigger, which creates the action to fire the bullet. And when like the round leaves the chamber, it creates that momentum, right? And that momentum gets you to the goal. That's the journey, right? And that's why I say the journey is the reward, because in order to even get to the journey, you need to create that spark by pulling the trigger. And pulling the trigger is something as simple as getting to the gym. Because once you get to the gym, you've changed your environment. You move from warm, comfy bed, let me just hit snooze and, I'll just say I'll wake up 15 minutes later and then go because I'll feel fresher. And then next thing is you sleep in for another 2-3 hours. Ask me how I know. you do that.
Yeah.
And then the day's wasted. You don't go to the gym because now the rest of life carries on. But once you get to the gym, everything's shifted. And naturally, the mind just triggers. The mind just switches. It's like, all right, cool. I'm now surrounded by people who are getting after it. I'm surrounded by people who are training. So now I need to put myself into that environment and do the process. And it becomes so much easier. And this is something I call eliminating decision fatigue.
Okay.
So that's on the latter end of the scale. But that was literally how I did it. Just start with the most basic thing, like set an alarm to go to bed, set an alarm to wake up. Okay, prepare your gym clothes the night before. So you eliminate that decision fatigue. You eliminate the process of thinking too much.
Yeah, it's ready.
It's there. Yeah. It's there for you. All you have to do is literally just don your clothes and get out the door and go.
Be ready.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that. I used to really try and fit in yoga into my morning routine, and being a single mum, trying to get kids ready in the morning, it was a nightmare. So I literally now put my yoga mat right next to my bed. So when I step out, I'm on the mat anyway. So it's not like, I've got to get the mat out. It's literally there. So these little simple tricks are actually really powerful. They can really change your day. And it reminds me of a quote that I've read by Martin Luther King Jr. He says, don't think of the whole staircase, just think of the first step. Right? Precisely. And that's my first step, is rolling on top of the yoga mat in the mornings. So I think anyone listening to that is just going to really resonate, because it is that whole, oh my God, like to go from gaming to going to bed 6 a.m. to now getting up and going to the gym, is those little small steps are just going to be more easier. And I was listening to a podcast the other day of Dr. Mike Hyman, I think his name is, with Jay Shetty, and he talks about to change habits, you need community. Yes. So what you sort of ended up building was this community of other people like you, like-minded, going to the gym, and knowing there's more people out there like you. I think that's so important. So if anyone is listening to this and they're in that, let's just say they're in that rut or that gaming era where they're just in that cycle, how do they build that community? If they, is that talking to somebody, like telling someone, or getting a personal trainer, getting an accountability partner? How would they build that community? Yeah.
So one thing that I personally would start off as like a no-no is talking too much. because there's actually scientific research behind this on people who, so there was a study of people who would talk about their goals and people who actually did their goals. And what they realized was they monitored their dopamine levels and they both had the same like output of dopamine, because when we talk about our goals, the mind starts to believe that, oh yeah, I'm actually achieving something. It's the same sensation that we get when we watch like a really like a high intensity action movie, or even like play a video game. You feel like you're achieving and accomplishing something. You're leveling up in this game, so you think like, yeah, I've made something. And then once you withdraw from that state of being, you go back to like the nothingness that I talk about, because all you've really done is just sat in front of a screen for like a couple hours,
Right.
or in my case, 16. That's a lot of productivity that went down the drain, right? So I would say the first thing to do is to find an accountability partner. And like you said, find a coach. Like I found a coach, you know, I needed to, even though I have a baseline of fitness and I've stepped into coaching myself now, but in order to even get there, you know, I needed to find somebody who's practiced that. Seek out someone who can coach. And it doesn't even have to be, you know, like a professional coach. It's just, your coach could be somebody who's just got that in their routine. It's in their system, because like you said, you have to surround yourself by like create the community. You have to surround yourself and be in that environment, and you're a product of your environment.
Absolutely.
So that's what I did. I just found a coach for my fitness to get my mindset, my mentality straight. I spoke to a counselor, and then this is the important part, because I've also worked with people who've approached me and said, hey, I want to change this, I want to change that. I say, sure, no problem. Here's the plan. This is, you know, your diet, etc. Let's get to work. And then for the next 3 weeks, I hear very little from them. Or when I look at the data through the check-ins, it's exactly the same. And I'm thinking, well, you came to me because you had a problem. I'm offering you my services to help you with said problem. But you're not committing, never mind committing to this part of the bargain or the deal, you're not committing to yourself. And if you don't make that self-commitment, like, it's done. It's a wrap. There's no point of even continuing, because you'll just fall short every single time. So adherence is like the number one thing. Once you've found your inroad, again, the mechanism, the trigger is, okay, I found the trainer, but the momentum really begins when you adhere to getting there.
Getting out there.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So you talked about your mindset as well. So one of the questions I had from you as well, because I know you haven't touched on this much here now, but I know you're really into your meditation and your mindfulness.
Yeah.
So what practices do you find really helpful for your mental well-being that you practice?
Yeah. So every day, I do like, I started off with just doing like a minute of just sitting still and listening to my breath, and it's just something as simple as just inhaling gradually and deeply through the nose, feeling the air fill my lungs, holding that breath, and then releasing it slowly. And that helped me really curb my anxiety whenever I felt, you know, anxious, or if I just felt like I was just out of alignment. That helped me just realign and synchronize. And there are different breathing techniques now that I've started to study and implement, like square breathing, you know, just like holding, you know, breathing in for like 4 seconds, holding for 4 seconds, exhale for 4, and hold the breath out for 4. And those have also helped me just calm and still my mind and eliminate the noise, right? And that's the objective to meditation. But one thing I do want to touch on, because loads of people have said this to me, which is, oh yeah, I've tried meditation, but I can't seem to just like blank my mind. And I say, well, the objective is not to blank your mind. It's to be able to sit still amidst all the noise around us. I mean, we're constantly surrounded by phones that are chiming off and pinging off all the time. We've got people sending us emails, we've got work, we've got personal relationships. When do you actually get time for yourself?
Yeah.
Right? And the best time for me that I found personally is the first thing when I wake up.
Yeah.
First thing when I wake up, because that's time for me to get in touch with myself, check in with myself, see, you know, how am I feeling today? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And that's it.
I think breathing is so powerful. I remember when I went for my counselling session, I was getting lots of sort of anxiety and panic attacks, you know, just trying to get the kids ready in the morning to go to school. And, you know, my therapist said to me, the only thing you can actually control in your life is your breath. And I used to do exactly the same. I do the box breathing, I do 3 SRB, and that just really calmed me, my environment. And like you say, there's so much chaos going in, but I'm just so still, and it feels like nothing can affect you. So for me, controlling my breath has just been so life-changing for me. And I do recommend anyone listening to try a breathing technique. Anyone can, you know, box breathing or whatever type of breathing you find. You just got to find something that works for you. And obviously when you're busy, like a minute is great, you know, a couple of minutes. I mean, I do like 6 minutes of breathing with 3 SRB. And I think if I can find 6 minutes, I can do that. I can do it in my car just before I pick the kids up, you know, it's a really powerful thing. But thank you for that. So I know there's lots of, you know, parents watching with children. And one thing I'm really mindful of is raising my son to be really open about his feelings and not be that generation that says like man up or, you know, don't cry like a girl and that sort of stuff. So, you know, what tip could you give me to sort of communicate with my son about any of his feelings that he's having when he's coming home? But how do we make an environment for our young generation that they're safe to talk about their feelings?
Yeah, so, you know, that's an interesting one because like I'm a firm believer in like the masculine and feminine energy, and everybody has both. Everybody has both. For men, there is the social pressure that they need to be like almost like on two extreme opposites of the spectrum, which is ludicrous. Like, how can you stretch someone and say, okay, you need to talk up and you need to like vocalize everything about how you feel, but then at the same time you need to be this like stoic, you know, nothing can move, immovable force of nature. And the best way to sort of find the balance, honestly, in my personal experience, it's actually quality time. Spending quality time, because I learned that from spending like quality time with like my parents, you know, with my mom, with my dad, and hearing them, also feeling like I was listened to.
Yeah, being really present, isn't it?
That's it. It's being present, right? And I mean, there's so many different sort of like behavioral hacks and everything, but I think just keep it simple, and it just needs to be from a sense of sincerity. And I know that there are people who will say, well, I can't have these conversations with my parents, or parents will be like, oh, like, don't be silly. You know, I'm the parent. You are like almost like a hierarchy. You're the subordinate. But I think it's just also recognizing the individual that you're dealing with, because everybody operates on different tiers of their masculine or feminine energy, and that's how you can get an understanding on how to communicate. You know, it's okay. Just what's going on. You know, and there's different ways to vocalize that. There's different ways to get the message across, and I think it's also just setting the tone. You know, that's why for parents, it's so important to be that role model, because you are the primary role model that shapes, well, your next generation. Basically, they are your legacy. You are shaping them on how to operate and interact with different people in the world. And yeah, they'll meet a mixed bag of people. I mean, I had people who used to call me soft when I would talk about my feelings. Oh, don't talk about feelings. That's something what girls do.
Yeah.
But then
we need to change that, don't we?
We need to change that. So we need to flip that script, and I feel like it's getting there, but then that also gets flipped to extremes, right? And I think there's got to be a balance. There has to be a balance. So you understand what type of boy you have, what type of girl you have, okay, and then you make the conscious decision to convey the message in a way that's appropriate. I think that's something that I've learned.
And I think that's really important. So, you know, like I say, being really present and creating that environment. So, for example, something that's I found that's worked for me and my son is, you know, if I ask him after school, hey, how was your day? I'm not really present because I'm driving the car, and he's just like knackered. But one thing we do at bath time is, he calls it, can we have mad time? Mad time stands for Mum and Dylan time.
Nice.
He's like, Mum, can we have mad time? So I'm like, yeah. And we have it every night. And there's 2 questions I ask him. One is there anything that happened today that you wish you could change? And then he'll tell me something, and that will be something like negative, like this happened to me. And then we end it on, describe something that made you laugh or made you happy. So he sort of ends his day with a bit of, positiveness, But I had to find those questions to sort of, not just him to say, yeah, today was fine, and then also when your kids tell you something, what do you then do with that information? Because sometimes they just want to share it and sometimes they actually want you to solve a problem. So I think for me, what I've learned is my son prefers to chat just before bed when he's winding down. And those are the two questions I can just sort of get out of him. So, what would you change today? And what made you happy? It's a really great way. But this has been really insightful about how you got out of the gaming, and that could be anything from someone listening to relate to sort of being locked down in COVID to losing that routine. But I think it's so relatable what you're going through, and also you're relating to a younger generation. And I think if you can do it, I think you'll be a great role model for them. We've got a closing question for you, Sravan. So this podcast is called Now I Know.
Yeah.
So I want the audience to come away saying, now I know how to support men's well-being. How do we open up to them? So what have you learnt in your recent years about your mental health, which you wish you knew before you went into the army to support your well-being?
Ooh, okay. That's a very good question. For me, I think it's also it's understanding like this sort of principle that I've started to really, sometimes I have to really remind myself on, which is just because you disagree with something doesn't mean that it's necessarily wrong or bad. And just because everybody else is doing it doesn't mean it's necessarily the right thing or good to do. I think for me, in particular, it's being like a non-conformist and really taking the time. Like if I could redo it, I would really take the time to check in with myself and understand just, who am I and what is it? What is it that drives me? What's my why? I always knew I wanted to be a soldier, but why?
But why, yeah.
But why? Have a strong why. And I say this to my clients. I have these conversations with other people when they bounce ideas off me, and I ask them why, and you'd be so surprised how many people just kind of stop dead in their tracks and like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Because I think we live in a society where everybody is just sort of funneled into like adhering to a lifestyle with social media, everything. It's like you need to do this because this person does it, or because this is the correct thing to do. Because you're Asian, you are going to be either a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher,
accountant,
yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, so when someone like myself says, "Oh, I'm going to be a soldier," like people in that respective community just kind of like look at me like,
why?
"Are you crazy? Why?" But then, yeah, I mean, to sort of like summarize, I would say just have a strong why.
Why? Absolutely.
Have a strong why, and that would answer so many of the issues or problems.
Absolutely.
And that underpins everything else.
Love that. Thank you so much for your time, Sravan.
Thank you.
I hope people listening here will get some tips on how to get out of that routine and maybe to create some small habits to break free from whatever they're going through. And I think you've probably inspired lots of people to open up, and I think it's absolutely great. So how can people connect with you on social media? Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel, which is just my first name, Sravan. And people can also reach out to me on Instagram, which is my first name, last name, at Sravan Alopi. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Resh.